In the next 60 seconds, you will see exactly how a $2 billion American fortress becomes a burning steel trap. The most powerful naval fleet in human history is taking catastrophic hits in the Persian Gulf, and the officials who command it are looking directly into the cameras and pretending nothing is wrong. In the climate-controlled briefing rooms of Washington, spokespeople stand behind heavy wooden podiums. They wear crisp suits, read from prepared binders, and speak in calm, measured tones. They assure the public that American deterrence remains absolute and unchallenged. But halfway across the world, the night sky is bleeding orange. The air over the water chokes with the thick smell of vaporized jet fuel and melting wiring. Sirens scream through the smoke-filled corridors of a United States warship. Sailors who went to sleep believing they were shielded by an impenetrable dome of state-of-the-art radar are now watching incoming fire bypass every single defensive countermeasure. The USS Abraham Lincoln, a floating symbol of global dominance, was just forced to absorb a staggering salvo of over 100 missiles. This is not an unverified rumor or a theoretical war game. The damage is real, documented, and undeniable. Yet the United States government remains desperately determined to minimize it. They ask the public to believe that Iran, a nation crippled by decades of severe technological sanctions, somehow pierced the ultimate defensive shield through sheer luck and local surveillance. But luck does not provide real-time satellite telemetry. Luck does not prioritize high-value targets, identify radar blind spots, and coordinate a swarm of drones with flawless, exquisite precision. Someone is mapping the exact coordinates of American assets from space. Someone is feeding the precise vulnerabilities of the fleet directly to the launch pads in Tehran. And when you discover exactly who is handing over those coordinates, you will finally understand why Washington is absolutely terrified to say their name out loud. Generations of Americans have been sold a very specific story. We picture an aircraft carrier cutting through the ocean like a blade of steel. We are told these vessels are floating sovereign islands, shielded by an impenetrable digital dome. We believe that a $2 billion Aegis combat system makes the United States Navy invincible. But the dark waters of the Persian Gulf are telling a very different story. When the proximity alarms on the USS Abraham Lincoln began screaming, the sailors staring at the radar screens realized they were not facing a standard engagement. They were watching the systematic dismantling of American naval doctrine. 101 missiles descended on the carrier strike group. This was not blind fire. The incoming munitions moved with a terrifying synchronization, deliberately designed to overwhelm the firing channels of the interceptors. Every evasive maneuver was anticipated. Every radar blind spot was exploited. In that same window of chaos, the strategic military base in Bahrain was effectively erased from the operational map. In the corridors of Washington, this is known as an inconvenient truth. The official posture of the administration is to simply look the other way. Admitting that American ships are burning means admitting that a $1 trillion defense budget has a fatal flaw. It forces the White House to confess to the American taxpayer that the era of uncontested naval supremacy is dead. So the press secretaries change the subject. They pivot to domestic politics. They insist that the origin of the targeting intelligence does not matter. They demand we ignore the smoke rising from the flight decks. But the smoke is impossible to hide. And the reason Washington is desperately looking away is not because they are ignorant of who is directing the missiles. It is because they know exactly who it is. When a suicide drone lifts off from a desert launch pad in Iran, it does not fly blind. It does not waste fuel searching for a target in the vast expanse of the Persian Gulf. By the time it clears the launch tube, its onboard computers already possess something the American intelligence community calls exquisite data. This is not local radar telemetry. This is real-time coordinate tracking streaming directly from Russian military satellites in low Earth orbit. Moscow is providing Tehran with an unprecedented digital map of the battle space. They are feeding Iranian commanders the exact locations of American destroyers, the shifting positions of aircraft stationed across the region, and a prioritized kill list of which defensive installations to blind first. For decades, the Pentagon relied on the Aegis combat system and Patriot missile batteries to maintain absolute air dominance. These systems are engineering marvels, but they were built to fight a conventional war against conventional targets. They were not designed to face a networked swarm guided by peer-level space intelligence. When Russian satellites read the American defensive posture, they identify the precise radar blind spots of every ship in the fleet. They calculate the exact reload times of the missile tubes. Armed with this information, Iran does not send a single massive missile. They send a swarm. Cheap, expendable drones flood the American radar screens, forcing the billion-dollar shields to exhaust their multi-million-dollar interceptors Once the defensive batteries are depleted and the automated systems are trapped in reload cycles, the heavy armor-piercing munitions strike the exposed hull. The terrifying reality of this new battlefield is that raw firepower means absolutely nothing if your enemy controls the flow of information. The United States spent generations building the most lethal warships on the planet. But a steel behemoth floating on the ocean is ultimately just a vulnerable target when a Russian satellite is staring right at it, whispering its exact coordinates to a launch pad 3,000 miles away. For years, the State Department built a firewall out of a very specific legal fiction. When American intelligence agencies handed Ukrainian forces the precise coordinates of Russian command centers and supply lines, Washington looked at the world and declared that providing targeting data is not the same thing as pulling the trigger. They insisted that giving an ally the exact location of their enemy does not make you an active participant in the war. Today, that exact logic is swinging back to shatter the American fleet. Vladimir Putin listened carefully to the American justification in Eastern Europe. Now, he is applying that same standard, word for word, to the waters of the Middle East. Russia is not firing missiles at the United States Navy. They are simply providing intelligence support to a partner nation defending itself. By the very rules of engagement established by Washington, Moscow claims its hands are completely clean. This is a masterclass in cold geopolitical mirroring. The Kremlin is deliberately transforming the Persian Gulf into America's own Ukraine. It is a brilliant and lethal trap of attrition. Moscow understands that fighting the United States in a direct, conventional war would invite absolute devastation. But a proxy war costs them nothing more than satellite bandwidth. By outsourcing the trigger pull to Tehran, Russia is bleeding American military readiness. They are forcing the Navy to burn through billions of dollars in irreplaceable interceptor missiles. They are exhausting the sailors and fracturing political resolve at home, all without risking a single Russian soldier on the battlefield. Washington spent years engineering a proxy conflict to drain the Russian war machine. Now, the architects of that strategy are caught in the exact same meat grinder, paralyzed by a deadly precedent they created themselves. While the world stares at Moscow and Tehran, the most dangerous architect of this war remains completely silent in the shadows. Beijing is not firing missiles. They are not sending satellite coordinates. They are doing something far more insidious. The official narrative focuses on economics. We are told China is simply buying embargoed oil and keeping the Russian and Iranian economies afloat by bypassing the United States dollar. But the real threat is not currency. It is the weaponization of the global supply chain. Every Iranian suicide drone that slams into an American hull is powered by a nervous system manufactured in Shenzhen. The microelectronics, the flight controllers, and the targeting sensors all flow through a quiet, unbroken pipeline from Chinese factories directly to Iranian assembly lines. Without these Chinese components, the drone production facilities in Tehran would grind to an absolute halt in a matter of weeks. Washington knows this perfectly well. So why do they refuse to choke off the supply? Because Beijing holds a terrifying trump card. If the United States attempts to sever the microchip pipeline to Iran, China can instantly retaliate by cutting off the export of rare earth minerals. Those are the exact same minerals the Pentagon relies on to build its own advanced fighter jets and precision munitions. American defense contractors cannot build weapons without Chinese raw materials. The chilling reality dawning on military planners is that the United States is no longer fighting a localized rogue state. They are locked in a lethal war of attrition against a fully integrated global defense industrial complex. American sailors are defending themselves against Iranian warheads, guided by Russian space intelligence built with Chinese technology. It is a synchronized execution, and Washington has absolutely no idea how to break the chain. 35 years ago, when the United States military moved into the Middle East, they brought the entire Western world with them. Operation Desert Storm saw a unified coalition of 40 nations standing shoulder to shoulder. The sky was filled with Allied aircraft. The sea was packed with a combined global armada. Look at the waters of the Persian Gulf today. American warships are taking direct hits, absorbing massive damage and burning in the night. But when Washington looks over its shoulder for backup, they are met with absolute, deafening silence. Where is the Royal Navy? Where are the French frigates? Where is the ironclad solidarity of the NATO alliance? They are nowhere to be found. The United States is standing completely alone in the crosshairs. The reason for this abandonment is a brutal reality of economics and military exhaustion. The the capitals of Europe have been completely hollowed out by the conflict in Ukraine. London, Paris, and Berlin have incinerated hundreds of billions of dollars to sustain a grinding proxy war in Eastern Europe. They have drained their national treasuries and emptied their armories. They simply have no interceptor missiles left to spare. Their populations are financially fatigued, and their leaders have absolutely zero political will to open a second, infinitely more dangerous front to protect American interests. The masterstroke of the Russian and Iranian strategy is not just striking the fleet, it is isolating the target. They have successfully stretched the American military to its breaking point, while simultaneously proving to the world that when the true crisis arrives, the legendary Western alliance shatters. America has finally found itself fighting a war where nobody is coming to help. For over a decade, the Iron Dome has been the ultimate safety blanket for the most fortified nation in the Middle East. It is a technological marvel that has allowed Israeli citizens to sleep soundly while rockets rain down from the sky, but a shield is only as strong as its ability to predict the incoming threat. If Russian military satellites possess the resolution to map the radar blind spots of an American destroyer in the open ocean, they can absolutely map the intercept trajectories of Israeli defense batteries. Moscow now holds the master keys to the regional airspace. If the Kremlin decides to feed Tehran the precise coordinates of Israel's missile silos, communication nodes, and early warning radars, that impenetrable dome shatters. This is not just a tactical shift. It is a complete and total rewrite of the balance of power. Look across the desert to the glittering skylines of the Arab world. The royal families in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi are watching this nightmare unfold, trapped in a terrifying paralysis. They built their trillion-dollar economic empires under the ironclad guarantee of American military protection. But Tehran has just delivered a ruthless and calculated ultimatum. The message from Iran is incredibly simple. If you allow the United States military to use your territory, your airspace, or your bases to launch operations, your infrastructure will burn. The Gulf states are staring down an impossible choice. They can harbor American troops and watch their multi-billion-dollar oil refineries and desalination plants be wiped out by precision drone strikes guided by Russian intelligence. Or they can evict the United States military entirely, effectively surrendering their security to the very neighbor they fear the most. The wedge has been driven deep. The architecture of Middle Eastern security is not just cracking under the pressure, it is being systematically dismantled. For most Americans, war is an abstraction. It is a spectacle of green night vision footage playing on a flat screen in the living room. But the reality of this conflict is not confined to the Middle East. It is creeping into your neighborhood. It is waiting for you at the local gas station. A 30% spike in fuel prices is not the ceiling of this crisis. It is merely the opening tremor of a catastrophic economic earthquake. The Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz represent the central artery of the global energy market. 20% of the world's supply of oil flows through a narrow choke point that is currently raining shrapnel and burning debris. If Iran, emboldened by Russian intelligence, decides to completely sever that artery, the financial fallout will be apocalyptic. We are not just talking about paying $10 for a gallon of gas. Petroleum is the lifeblood of the modern supply chain. When diesel prices double, the cost of every single item on a grocery store shelf doubles. The fleets of delivery trucks freeze. The agricultural machinery stops running. A total blockade of the Gulf will trigger a wave of hyperinflation that will shatter the American middle class in a matter of months. The United States experienced a taste of this panic during the oil shock of the 1970s. We saw the crippling stagflation and the mile-long lines at the pumps. But the American economy of the 70s was not tethered to a fragile, hyper-connected global delivery system. If the shipping lanes close today, the system does not just slow down, it collapses. Moscow and Beijing know exactly what they are doing. They do not need to launch a single warhead at the American homeland to break it. They just need to turn off the engine of the global economy and watch the United States suffocate from the inside out. The conversation inside the most secure rooms of Washington has crossed a terrifying line. The prospect of an American ground invasion is no longer just theoretical. Reports confirm that there is serious private interest at the highest levels of government in deploying troops directly into Iranian territory for specific strategic missions. This desperate pivot is happening because the shadow war has already failed. The original plan was to use Kurdish forces to trigger internal instability and fracture the regime from the inside. But after 3 separate attempts, that proxy destabilization strategy has completely collapsed. With the air campaign failing to stop the missile strikes, The pressure to put American boots on the ground is escalating rapidly. While no official order has been signed yet, the serious consideration of this option marks a massive escalation in planning. There is a fatal delusion among certain political factions. They look at a map and mistake Iran for the battlefields of Iraq or Afghanistan. That is a catastrophic miscalculation. A ground assault into Iran means invading a massive nation of 90 million people. It means sending mechanized forces into extraordinarily difficult mountain terrain. It means fighting a deeply motivated military and a population that is spent 40 years being told that American soldiers represent an existential threat to their way of life. Washington planners seem to have forgotten the grim mathematics of the body bag calculus. Launching airstrikes is politically sustainable as long as the casualties remain entirely on the other side of the world. But the exact moment military transport planes start bringing young Americans home in flag-draped coffins, the domestic political equation changes irreversibly. The current administration is staring down approaching midterm elections. The public is already furious over fuel prices surging by 30%, and domestic support for this war was never strong to begin with. Committing ground forces to the Iranian mountains would produce American casualties at a massive scale. It would not just end the military campaign, it would permanently end the administration that ordered it. The fires burning in the Persian Gulf are doing more than consuming American steel. They are illuminating the birth of a completely new geopolitical reality. This conflict is not just a localized shadow war between Washington and Tehran. It is a massive, brutal demonstration playing out on a global stage, and the entire global South is sitting in the front row. Nations across Africa, South America, and Asia are watching the live feeds. For decades, they were held in check by the terrifying myth of absolute American military supremacy. They were told that crossing Washington's red lines would invite instant and catastrophic destruction. But today, they are watching the invincible empire bleed. They are watching a coalition of heavily sanctioned adversaries systematically degrade the most expensive navy on Earth, while the United States government desperately pretends it does not matter. Moscow and Beijing have accomplished their ultimate strategic objective. They have proven to the rest of the world that American power is no longer absolute, and that the ultimate enforcer of the global system can be successfully challenged without triggering a nuclear apocalypse. The unipolar era is officially dead. We have entered a multipolar reality where the old rules of deterrence have been completely incinerated. The official briefings from the major networks will continue to lie to you. They will continue to minimize the damage, pivot to domestic distractions, and tell you that the smoking ruins of our military bases are irrelevant. But the official version of this war is collapsing with every ship that takes a hit. You cannot afford to be blind to what is coming next. Subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with everyone in your network who is trying to wake up and understand the full scope of what is happening to our country and our world. The mainstream media has abandoned the truth, but we are going to keep tracking every single move on this chessboard. We will see you in the next transmission.